So I am here with Stormi Lewis. From what I understand, you are a multi-published author. You've published a couple books. Is that correct?
That is correct. I started before I claimed to be an author. I actually have two nonfiction kind of memoir books
Cool.
out in the world, and then the Sophie Lee saga, which is a paranormal thriller. We are on book three.
And which you are preparing for ARC readers, from what I understand, here in the next couple of weeks.
I am. That is the goal, because I always release a book for my birthday, and the series started on my birthday this time last year, and so I've been putting out a Sophie book about every 6 months. So
Awesome. Oh, and you said paranormal thrillers, right?
yes.
And I want to know what the story is behind that, the paranormal thriller. I mean, I've admittedly read anything like that before, but I'd love to understand where you came up with this idea.
I was told that's what I did on TikTok, on
Oh,
BookTok.
okay.
So Sophie is a story. The Key was originally a story that I started in middle school, and it got thrown away. And I was having a hard time because I have an older soul and kind of older mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, when I did write, would accuse me of like copywriting because they said it was too good or whatever, too mature for my actual age.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then yeah, and then I had family members that were like, writers don't make any money, and so I was really discouraged from continuing on. And so my nonfiction started in 2017 because I was getting out of a very abusive, toxic marriage, and I had to have an emergency divorce. But I was also going to get my degree in marketing and business management, but the community college didn't have an internship program. So we were doing a lot about email marketing and blogs and stuff. So I started a blog, and that's how Chasing Stormi became to be. And so I used some of my blogs, and I was just trying random things, and like I went and did a yoga class, and she said, we're going to Belize for a week, you should so come with us.
Huh.
And I packed a bag and I got on the plane and arrived, and she didn't tell me it was a couple's trip, so there was that.
Oh gosh.
But everybody was super nice. She had told them about the concept of my blog because I was trying to break my people pleasing addiction that I'd had for 35 years at that point. And so I was really trying to step outside of my comfort zone and try new things. And by the end of that trip, I knew there was a story. It was the first time that I knew I had a story that really needed to come out. And so I went back home, and on spring break, I wrote Surviving the Storm. And so I used some of my blog posts, and I added things like my trip to Belize because I'm afraid of heights. And I climbed the tallest Mayan temple. Well, I bear crawled and I butt scooted down like a kid on stairs, but I still got up there and down. And I almost drowned when I was little, so I can't stand to have water on my face, and even in the shower. And I actually went snorkeling on that trip.
Oh
So I
wow.
really felt like I was doing things and growing. And so Surviving the Storm, the first about 2/3 of it is about me just being the nerd that I am. And then the last third, I opened that closed door that nobody knew what was going on behind, and really shared details of my marriage. And so, but I didn't know anything about being an author. It was just everything at that point was, here's how to publish on Amazon. Nobody had anything of, okay, what happens after you push publish? So
Right.
I pushed publish, and I was like, now what? And yeah, so that didn't really do a whole lot. And then my second book after that was just a giant thank you card, because I had a lot of people that shaped who I am now, like my Nana, and Miss Jo was my dance teacher. So I wrote a book just for them where each person had a chapter that had changed my life and basically made me who I was. And even to the day Nana died, that was the greatest gift I could have ever given to her. She told everybody at the bank, at the hospital, like everyone, I'm in a book.
That's amazing.
But then I didn't really write because I was trying to work off that, expensive pieces of paper that hang on my wall now. And COVID hit, and I was working for a travel insurance company. And so I was getting screamed at basically because people were just upset about so many things. They were being forced into lockdown. Their trips were being canceled. People were dying. Like we had a lot of elderly people that go on cruises and like their spouse died before they ever got to go on the trip. Man. And then canceled. Like it was just a hot mess. And I am bipolar and I really feed off of other people's emotions. And it turns out you don't have to be in front of me for me to do that. And so and September to February is always a hard time for me because people get more anxious about the end of the year, finding that perfect Christmas gift. I mean, like so many things come into play at the end of the year that is really hard for me. And so between that, COVID, being locked up, and getting yelled at, I called a friend and said, I have got to find something that will give me hope, and balance me out from all of this going on. And her first thing was, you've got to get back to writing. So we talked about some options and I told her about how I had started the Key in middle school and I told her about it. And she was like, you have to write this. And so I thought about it for about 3 days, and then I got a couple pages out, and my friend Mario, who is in the saga, I use him as a sacrificial lamb, depending on how much he irritates me. But he came over, and I didn't even have a chapter yet. And he was like, this would be an epic trilogy. And I'm like, it's not even a book, dude. And so it was originally supposed to be a trilogy, but as we've discussed before, I was taking a shower. And, we're always the last to know, but I thought, oh, great, I have more books to write. So I guess it's a saga now. But when I was writing The Key, Nana had been diagnosed with cardiovascular disease or dementia. And so that's like the worst kind you can have because your blood pressure drops constantly. And the end result is basically a heart attack or a stroke. There's no peaceful way of going from that. And so I originally started writing, it was just supposed to be suspense thriller. And then the next thing I knew, Sophie was talking to her parents that had been murdered when she was sleeping. And then when I got to writing The Protector, Nana's condition was getting worse and we had to put her in hospice, and she actually died the Monday before my book came out on Friday. And so it was really bittersweet, but the dream realm grew. There was a council of death. And, even though she couldn't remember a lot of what I told her, she had this great ability of, she would always do the, ooh, when she got interrupted, like, ooh, that sounds good. I like that. And then it was funny because the day she died, I was already writing Dead Draw at that point. And I was having a certain part of my story where I was trying to figure out like how I was going to resolve that particular scene. And when I went upstairs to where she stayed with my parents, because she had broken her tailbone. And so she'd been staying with my parents the whole time through COVID. Well, it was a saving grace because that's how we found out. We started noticing she wasn't okay. Because when you call her and you talk to her or you visit with her, if it's a short visit, she can fake it enough to where you didn't know, none of us knew something was going on. But when the longer she was with us, she couldn't fake it all the time. Anyway, so I went in and like the door was closed and I was nervous because I've never lost somebody that close to me. And I knew this was going to be really difficult for me. But when I opened the door, it was just so warm. And I went and I sat in the rocking chair by the window where she always sat. And I closed my eyes, and I kid you not, the whole scene played before me of the time, the whole section I was struggling with. And then I heard her say, now get to work. And I'm like, I'm working on it. She was so impatient. But because I was like dealing with grief and not wanting to say goodbye to her, I started writing so that Sophie never really had to say goodbye to the people she loved either and didn't feel like she was alone. And then I got on Book Talk and somebody went, "Hey, you write paranormal thriller." And I went, "Is that a thing?" Thank you,
Oh,
Book Talk,
yes.
for telling me what I write. I didn't know.
That is awesome. What a great day when you find out exactly what niche you've been writing in all this time, right?
Yeah, well, because I was kind of going back and forth. I'm like, okay, well, it is suspense thriller, but this fantasy thing keeps coming in, and I don't know what to do with that. Like, how do I categorize this book? And, all you got to do is ask Book Talk. They'll tell you.
I think maybe I should query them to see what the true niche mine is. And I'd say for fantasy, perhaps I'll do a quiz one day and see what people have to answer. But
hey, I get a lot of answers from Book Talk. I'm like, oh, okay, let me take notes. Hold on.
Just learn from you as much as I can. So I think it sounds like, I mean, based on all I've listened to your podcast as well, which we'll get into a little bit later about, I know you've talked a number of times about mental health and why you're so passionate about it. So what makes you so passionate about mental health? Is it from all of these life experiences that you've had throughout your author career in your life?
Just in general in life, I remember being 5 years old and it was the first time I had a suicidal thought. And it was so weird because it's hard to explain. I read a lot of books because when you're bipolar, when I'm manic, not only do I talk really fast and I am like on speed, but I don't sleep. I cannot, because I have ADHD mixed in. Yeah. So I do not sleep well anyway. So I would just read books. And the only way as a kid to really survive it was, first of all, if I had a suicidal thought, I just counted it. I didn't like get to the planning stage or anything like that. I'm like, oh, okay, that's one. And now that I'm on medication, I usually just kind of call in and go, we need to adjust something if I get a higher number than what I'm comfortable with. But as a kid, you don't know what's going on with you. You just know that there's something not really wrong. You feel like something's wrong with you because you don't understand it. And so I was always kind of categorizing it, not as a split personality, but kind of as bad Stormi versus good Stormi. Good Stormi is what you're listening to. This is me. But I have bad days. And some of those bad days means I have suicidal thoughts. I can't get out of bed. I lived for 20 some odd years not knowing what that was. I just knew there was something different about me. And so I kind of learned bag of tricks a long time ago. Because as much as I have suicidal thoughts, because it's a part of the chemical imbalance, there's no getting around it. I just have them. But I also have a high desire to live. And so I kind of came up with different bag of tricks. Like, I know I'm now the kind of person that if you ask me if I'm hungry and I go, not really, if I don't eat in 20 minutes, I might set the world on fire. Not really, but those are the kind of looks you'll get, and I'll start to get really angry. I learned later that sleep is important, even before I was taking medication. So when I went away to college, I got off a really bad sleep schedule. And so I had 8 a.m. English classes because I knew I thought better in the morning, but I had play practice until like midnight or whatever, but it takes me so long to wind down. And I became manic. And so I was high as a kite for like 6 months straight. Like when I say I couldn't sleep, like 10 minutes, maybe. Everybody in my classes, like my theater classes and dance classes and the play, were coming over and they were massaging me and making me listen to water. And I was like, I just have to pee. This isn't working. Like, I would go down to the gym and run on the treadmill until my legs almost broke. Like I was just but my body was exhausted, but my brain wouldn't shut off. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the big problem. And so like I got so sick that my body shut down. Well, when you're that high, you go the other direction. And so then it was kind of like, the best way to describe it is just like sitting in a captain's chair on like Star Trek, and you're watching your life happen like a movie, but you're not really participating. Like if somebody asked me a question or something, I could respond, but I wasn't really invested or involved.
Sure.
I was just watching a movie. And then we had a class on in psychology. There was a chapter on bipolar disorder. And I know they say don't diagnose yourself, but never did I feel more better, because I was like, oh my God, this is me. But my teachers were like, but you behave so well in the classroom. This is not you. And I was like, hello, mom worked for the school district. If I did anything wrong, I would get the belt before I got home. Like
Mm-hmm.
my mom would know before I ever got home if something, if I was acting out or whatever. So yeah, I know how to act in a classroom. And I went and I told my parents, and they were just like, you're fine, whatever. Because my mom was the health aide, which is like the school nurse.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she used to medicate those kids. And she watched how they drooled and didn't know who they were and stuff, because it's difficult to medicate anyway, because the brain is continually changing your chemical makeup. So like if you're taking allergy medicine for a really long time and then it just doesn't work because your body becomes immune, bipolar meds are the same way. But the problem is that your brain chemical makeup is forever changing. So drugs tend to wear off a lot faster than like a year at a time or whatever. And so I understand their point of view, but I kind of wish I would have had at least therapy so I had an understanding. So again, it wasn't until I took that psychology class, then I really pulled myself out of it, because I usually could eventually find a reason to pull myself out one way or another. But it's very difficult when you don't know what's going on. And then I went to Vegas to help my sister, and he painted the bedroom blood red. I'm not talking just the walls. He did the ceiling too. And there were bars on the windows, and they fought constantly. So I was always in that room with no light. And I started to feel like I was going down a very dark path I didn't want to go down. And so I went to the doctor, and that's I didn't get officially diagnosed till I was 22. So mental health to me, because the sad thing is when I got answers, I was like, I can tell everybody now, because what was happening was I became addicted to people pleasing, because the more I could get somebody to like me when I was okay, then maybe they would forgive me more when I wasn't. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to make other people like me. And then when I got answers, I would tell my jobs, and I would tell, my coworkers, and then I would be fired because it was a right to work state. And, mental illness still has the biggest stigma than anything else, being gay, whatever. Like mental illness is the one thing that still has a huge stigmatism to it, because what people know of mental illness comes from homeless people and what they portray on TV. And that is not everybody, because your chemical makeup of your brain is as unique as your fingerprints. And there are people that are very high functional, that are like doctors and everything else, actors, a whole bunch of people that have mental illnesses that can still function, because we choose to take something that was given to us and turn it into an asset instead of a weakness. And so the more I talk about it, then maybe somebody who's having the same suicidal thoughts won't go all the way through to the planning stage where they can't be saved, because they won't feel like they're by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's that is definitely an experience that I can imagine you not only feel close to, but you can imagine it kind of brings you together with people who are potentially having similar experiences. Now, I know mental health looks a lot different for a lot of different people. I know I've got some pretty close family members that have been diagnosed with depression, and that comes with its own challenges and whatnot in terms of both medical and just like trying to manage that. If some people prefer to try to do without medication, and that's challenging in and of itself, right? There's a lot of things that come with it. But I mean, even people who have not been diagnosed with these things can find themselves with somewhat poor mental health, particularly people who have lots going on, right? I mean, the experiences you just shared were all in tandem with other things, I imagine, trying to hold jobs, trying to write books, trying to, manage all sorts of these other things. And I know with myself, there's a lot going on. And so maintaining a healthy mental health is extremely challenging already, but then add all these other aspirations and all of these other goals, such as independently publishing books, and it just complicates the mix so much more. So I'm curious to know, like, from your perspective, what have you found has helped you manage everything, right, with your ideas and goals, I should say, of publishing the Sophie Lee saga in the midst of all of these things going on?
There are a few things that you just have to do. And first and foremost, you really have to know yourself. Mm-hmm. I know if I don't shut off social media at a certain time at night and wind down, I will not sleep. If I don't sleep for 3 days, I become manic. That becomes an issue. I know that I have to not watch the news. Yeah. Like you have to really know yourself well enough. And if you don't know yourself, make a journal. I'm terrible at journaling, but even when you start treatment of any kind, they will tell you to make a journal, because you have to figure out what your triggers are and how to avoid the triggers or work around them. So the biggest, most important thing is to know yourself. If there are certain things that don't make you feel good, then don't do them. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, yes, technically pre-orders are supposed to be done 3 months before the book comes out, apparently, is what I've been told. Well, guess what? Mine's only going to be a month. I had a lot going on. We sold Nana's house and things like that. And I had to take care of myself, because losing Nana was and still is a very difficult thing for me. So I have to give myself grace. If I get up in a day and I don't feel like writing, like today, or editing, and I get asked to go to the park and play with kids from an author friend, then because if I'm not recharging on a regular basis, then I'm no good to myself or anybody else. And that includes my writing. So you have to know your strengths and know your weaknesses and work with them. So journal, figure what they are. That includes knowing when is your best time to write. If you're a morning person, then knock it out in the morning. If you're a night owl, then knock it out at night. What's really important to understand is what works for one person does not work for everyone. You've got to find what works for you. Don't listen to what everybody else says. Find out what works for you. Because if you're not happy with your writing, so like I can't outline. I plan my world every day. But if you ask me to outline my story, my writing is crap. It's forced. It's confined. Yep. I can't do it. So I don't.
I don't either. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. I limit negativity. And then the other biggest thing I do is not besides giving myself grace, because some days I wake up and I have a massive migraine. So I don't get writing done. For me personally, I know I don't write well with confinement. So I never say I want to get X amount of pages or X amount of words. I say, hey, I got 3 hours. Let's see what we can do. And I always write more than I expect to when I do it that way.
Yeah.
That's me. And that's what works for me. The third thing, the biggest important thing would be celebrate your wins. Okay. So, if that is because there are days for me where it's just pulling off the covers and putting my feet on the floor and getting out of bed. That's a huge win. If I celebrate with some chocolate, which isn't helping my waistline, that's okay. Or watching a favorite movie or something. Like, I celebrate everything. I practice gratitude, but some days it's just getting out of bed, and that's a huge win. And I know that, therefore I celebrate it. I treat myself to something sweet, or I pull out a favorite book and I give myself some me time. But you have to celebrate whatever win, and don't let anybody dictate how big or little your win is, because they're all wins, period. So it's hard being on Book Talk and Author Talk and seeing all these people that are like, I have 65,000 followers. I am a bestseller author. Well, I have 5 books out. I've never seen the bestseller, but I also know I'm in a large category and I'm okay with it. Because as long as I'm still enjoying the journey, then I'm okay with that. I'll get there one day, but bestseller shouldn't define your success. And that's what's really sad. I think so many of us feel like if we don't hit that bestseller, because that's what society decided. If you're not a bestseller, your writing sucks. Well, let me tell you, the books that saved my life and got me out of bed as a kid and helped me not take my own life, I promise you were most likely not bestsellers. Because by the 2nd grade, I had read every single book in the freaking library and our local library, because I just loved reading. But it had nothing to do with, I didn't care at 7 if it had a bestseller sticker on it. I wanted the story.
Yep.
And that's why your story is so important, because those stories saved my life. Those stories gave me a reason to keep going, whether it was from the bully inside my head, which is myself, or getting bullied at school. And I will tell you, when I wrote The Key, my 65-year-old father has now decided he wants to write books, and we published his first one in July.
Oh, how cool.
The second one for Christmas. So you have no idea what your story is going to inspire, even if it's fiction, because I was not reading nonfiction at 7. I promise you, I was looking for the escapes. So whether you're fiction or nonfiction, your story is going to change a life. And that's what you need to focus on. If you don't get bestseller right off the bat, that's okay. If you get a negative review, that's okay. It just means they weren't your reader and you're still on point. You're still going well. So yes, I am a huge advocate for mental health. I am a huge advocate for really defining what success means to you as a person, because it's going to be different for us all. Yes, we all want to see our books in libraries, bookstores, be a bestseller, but you pushed publish. And what you may not realize is in the US alone, there's 328 million plus people, and only less than 1% follow through with actually publishing their story. So think about all the people that are like, I want to publish a book and never do. And guess what? You did. That is a huge freaking win. Go celebrate, because you earned it.
I love that. I mean, that's an excellent soapbox to be on, though, because yeah, really looking at your own journey and recognizing it for what it is. The whole comparison game only causes more terrible mental health for anybody, right? Because whether or not you think you are better or they are better doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, your journey is unique, and that's what's most important. So focusing on those things, focusing on those wins is where you win, right? Where you come out on top. So well, great. I appreciate you joining me today. I want to know, where can people find more information about you, about your blog, about your podcast? I mean, you've got all sorts of things going on. Tell the listeners where they can find more about you and your books.
Oh my goodness. So the blog had to be put on hold, as did Bookish Chatter, which just because I was dealing with my own grief. I'm hoping to bring it back by November. But Bookish Chatter is on all major platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google, you name it, Anchor. But it's directly on my website, which is Chasing Stormi with an I, because I'm the OG. I am not a Kardashian. She's still whatever. Stormi.com. So chasingstormi.com. That's where you're going to find a lot of the information. I am terrible with my newsletters because I get so annoyed by other people emailing me like that I don't send out very many. But if you subscribe to the newsletter, that's where you get a lot of information. I am also on Book Talk under Chasing Stormi and Instagram. If you're a new author, really Bookish Chatter and my Instagram account, I give you a lot of tips and tricks and just personal experience. Book Talk kind of focuses more on the actual book series and how crazy I am, because why not? But yeah, so chasingstormi.com, Instagram and TikTok under Chasing Stormi.
Sorry for the pause. I was actually taking a moment to look at your website again. I've been there before, but I was perusing it to see all of the things that you were discussing. But yeah, I really appreciate you joining me today. I will definitely be actually reading your books. I admit I have not read your books. I've looked into them. We've had some pretty hilarious associations between our books on Book Talk, namely me accidentally calling someone Sophie when their name isn't Sophie. I'm terrible with names. And your books are Sophie.
Yeah, I know. And I did your dance this morning.
I did see that. And I haven't had a chance to actually add some commentary on that because today's been crazy at work. But I will definitely be jumping on there and making note of that. I didn't miss it. I'll just say that much. I definitely didn't miss it.
You are fine. I just like to support as many people on their journey as possible because we all have to start somewhere.
We do. And you got to start. That's the thing. Start and just keep rolling, keep plugging along, no matter how challenging it can be. But well, excellent. Thank you again.